Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this ordinary meeting of Council on the 20th of April 2022. First of all, we do acknowledgement of country. Wingecarribee Shire Council acknowledge the Gundungurra and Tharawal people as the traditional custodians of this land we now call Wingecarribee Shire. I pay my respect to elders both past, present and emerging. I would also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here or watching today. The Council Prayer. Let us meet in this Council chamber in a spirit of fellowship and goodwill to represent all members of the community in its cultural and religious diversity, to be honest and objective in all our deliberations, to respect the view of the residents, the rights of all to express their opinions without fear or favour, and to make decisions for the common good of the community. I acknowledge the statement of ethical obligations. Obviously there's no apologies, everyone is here. Confirmation of minutes. I would move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on Wednesday 16 March 2022 be adopted as a correct record of the proceedings of the meeting and declare that carried. General Manager, declarations of interest?
No declarations, Mr. May.
I have 1 minute, which is my usual community update, which I will read. I raised the possibility of Council seeking an additional 0.8% in rate income in the next financial year at the March meeting and authorised the General Manager to commence the process. The original cap of 1.2% that IPART had advised meant there would be a shortfall of about $4.85 million over the 10-year life of the Council's long-term financial plan. When the Council's draft plan and budget for 22-23 goes on public exhibition, the decision taken at the last meeting means it will be advertised with two options, 1.2 and 2%. If this action was not taken, the potential shortfall in income for next year's budget would be $425,000. The decision to place on exhibition the two options has attracted some publicity, and I raise the matter simply to inform that my decision to advertise a possible 2% rate increase simply maintains the integrity of the long-term financial plan endorsed on many occasions by the suspended Council. The bulky waste collection across the Shire is now complete, and from driving around it appears to have been very well used. I've asked the General Manager to report to Council on the estimated utilisation and the amount collected. Pardon me. As the collection is to occur again next year and will be included in the next domestic waste contract, I would like to hear from residents about their experiences and possible improvements. From my own observations, the zones should be much smaller as there was far too much rubbish standing on the curb for too long, although in fairness the weather did not help. Many regional councils, including Wingecarribee, are facing significant operational challenges in terms of assessing and determining development applications. This has been a long-standing issue in the Wingecarribee Shire, with more applications received than determined over the past few years. Pardon me. Over 1,000 development applications were made last year, and assessing these appropriately to meet community and customer expectations has been a challenge for staff. Growth in application numbers, COVID impacts and competition across government at both local and state levels for planning staff has made the situation difficult, particularly for residents having to wait too long for smaller scale residential approvals. This is not a criticism of staff, with many working long hours to support the organisation, their colleagues and customer needs, but I recognise that we have reached a point where we are in need of urgent assistance. The General Manager and Director of Communities in place are addressing this with particular emphasis on increased resourcing. Some of the changes already made: introduction of a new online duty planning system, securing assistance from the Department of Planning's Flying Squad, active recruitment for staff, appointment of specialist contractors, and additional resources requested from neighbouring councils. More will be required to ensure the core services of development assessment and certification are properly supported over the next 6 months so that the current backlog is assessed, the systems reset, processes improved, and customer and community confidence restored. I'll be requesting regular updates from senior staff on progress in this area and have asked that a status report be provided to the June Council meeting. Businesses in Robinson have been impacted by the closure of Macquarie Pass. As part of the Small Business Month program, Service New South Wales were active in various forums which were open to all businesses and networks in the Highlands. More recently, council officers have been in contact with the Robinson Chamber of Commerce to organise for Service New South Wales to attend one of their meetings to discuss individual needs. I would also like to highlight the Potato Festival, which will be held on Saturday the 30th of April and Sunday 1 May at the Robinson Showground. This festival will bring all things potato to life, from cultivation to the culinary experiences. From making mash to moonshine, to art making and growing, cooking and competitions. There will be opportunities to explore and celebrate the diversity and importance of this staple food, which is the world's 4th largest fruit crop. It's a great initiative for the town, and I hope people across the Shire support them. Council staff have been working with the Robinson community to develop a Robinson Place plan, and one of the issues that has been raised through that process is the impact of heavy vehicles on the Illawarra Highway. Not only the impacts on amenity and pedestrian safety within the Robinson village, but also the regular closing of Macquarie Pass as a result of heavy vehicles that restrict movements to and from the Highlands. I'll be asking the General Manager to raise these concerns with both the Department of Transport and our state members to investigate whether restricting heavy vehicle usage on Macquarie Pass is an option to resolve these issues. In addition, my personal observation is that such a restriction would also assist Argyle Street, Mossvale, with Picton Road use by heavy vehicles. With Picton Road for use by heavy vehicles, it would appear to be a safer route. With Anzac Day fast approaching, it's pleasing to be advised that the federal government has approved a grant of $61,000 under the Saluting Their Service Commemorative Grants program to assist in the repair and upgrade of the Vietnam War Memorial and Cherry Tree Walk in Barrow. On 18 March, I attended the Illawarra Infrastructure and Investment Summit in Wollongong that was very well attended and included presentations from the Chair, Infrastructure Australia, and a number of panel presentations involving politicians and key professionals. Business Illawarra is to be congratulated on the initiative. On Wednesday 30 March, together with the General Manager and Mr Park, I attended a meeting at Parliament House, Sydney, with the Minister for Planning and Minister for Homes, the Honourable Anthony Roberts MP, which was organised and also attended by the Member for Goulburn, the Honourable Wendy Tuckerman MP. The purpose of the meeting was to brief Minister Roberts on the strategic planning challenges that confront this council, particularly in relation to the Southern Highland Innovation Precinct and implementation of the housing strategy, and to seek financial assistance from the state. Generally, our representations aligned with the report on the matter adopted at the March meeting, and we received a very good hearing. It's appropriate that the Comungi Chelsea Gardens Overview Report is on this agenda, as it again highlights Council's failure at both the political and administrative levels to address issues strategically, and I can assure residents that this is now a priority, and while the past cannot be recovered, lessons have been learnt. I was fortunate to be invited by the Wingecarribee Reconciliation Group to the annual Mirror Flash at, I hope I get this right, Gibbergunya Reserve in Barrow on Saturday 9 April. The event was well organised by the Reconciliation Group, and unfortunately the weather wasn't very kind to us at all, so there was obviously no mirror interaction with the residents of Leura. But we were welcomed with the smoking ceremony, which has been a cultural piece for our First Nations people, and it was a good day, and I was very wet, but I've got to say I was pleased to have been invited. I would move that this update be received and noted, and would declare that carried. We now move on to the printed staff reports. The first item being 9.1, where earlier today we had representations made to us. General, by Randall Walker. Yeah, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Last, the Executive Manager Strategic Outcomes, Mr. Park, to introduce this report.
Executive Manager, promotion. Congratulations.
Thank you. Look, thank you. So, Mr. May, this report relates to proposed amendments to the New South Wales Standard Instrument Local Environmental Plan in relation to agritourism. So the proposed amendments aim to support the agricultural industry through what's been a particularly challenging few years with multiple rounds of the pandemic and a number of natural disasters, and I guess provide farmers with an opportunity to diversify the on-farm income through low-scale and low-impact agritourism uses. And both agriculture and tourism are really critical industries locally to support local employment and to support local economic development. And Council have worked closely with the community, industry and the government agencies to advocate for these changes over a number of years. And I'm certainly confident that the proposed changes by the state government strike an appropriate balance about supporting agriculture, but of an appropriate scale that mitigates the impacts and doesn't undermine our rural landscapes. So the matter was reported to the local planning panel, and the local planning panel raised some concerns with the initial staff recommendation, and particularly in relation to the state government process for amending legislation and lack of immediate community engagement that is part of that process. So the report that you have before you, the recommendation was updated to reflect the panel's advice. Probably need to be clear that the recommendation in the report, while it's been updated to reflect the panel's advice, what is not clear in the report is that the staff do not support the panel's advice in full. So it's apparent, I guess, that where the staff do not support the advice provided by the panel, that more detail or an alternate staff recommendation should be provided in the report. And in future business papers, we'll make sure that that's how that's presented to Council. In this instance, though, after considering the panel's advice, the staff have provided an alternate recommendation that isn't in the business paper, but I will read it out for you, and I believe I've provided a copy to the Council staff. But the recommendation from staff is that in relation to the draft Standard Instrument Local Environmental Plans Amendment, Agritourism Order 2021, Council, 1, write to the Department of Planning and Environment with the following nominations to be incorporated into the Wingecarribee Local Environmental Plan 2010. And A, the new definitions of farm gate premises and farm experiences premises be made permissible in zones where extensive agriculture is permissible, being the RU1, RU2, RU4, C3 and C4 zones. The following development standards for farm gate premises be set under the optional clause 5.24 for farm gate premises, so a maximum gross floor area of 200 metres squared and a maximum number of guests of 50. And then for point 2, in relation to farm stay accommodation, Council maintain the existing development standards by A, continuing to allow farm stay accommodation in the RU1, RU2, C3, C4 and SP3 zones. B, continuing to prohibit farm stay accommodation in the RU4 zone. And C, not adopting the optional clause 5.23 for farm stay accommodation. And then for point 3 of the recommendation is that Council prepare a planning proposal to nominate additional development standards for farm stay accommodation in consultation with the community and industry. And we've put this recommendation forward in that it doesn't undermine the existing development standards for farm stay accommodation. It also provides opportunities to diversify the agricultural income and support primary producers during what's been a particularly challenging time. And it's certainly consistent with Council's overall strategic priorities in supporting agritourism in the Shire.
This has become a complex matter. I understand your concerns through the General Manager that it appears that the panel's recommendation is now endorsed by the staff. How do we handle that at the minutes, General Manager?
Sorry, to the Group Manager, Community and Corporate.
Look, I have a suggestion. I don't think you can change the published document, but what Mr. Parker's just said, we could incorporate into the minutes. I definitely am, because, look, I've probably caused this problem because I was the one who was having trouble differentiating between the staff recommendations and the panel recommendations, and until now, the staff have been pretty happy with the panel recommendations. Is that fair to say?
Yep, look, this is the first time where we haven't agreed with the panel recommendation.
Well, I think you have a professional responsibility to speak up. There's nothing surer than that. So if we can add what Mr. Parker said into the minutes, and that would clear it up, but then needs to be specific reference to the fact that he stated. Did you have roughly written out what you said?
Very loosely. I should read
Well,
my notes a lot better than
we've
I
got
do.
it recorded. I understood what Mr. Parker was saying, so we can dictate that down. But also, I think it would be beneficial to this if we also added what Mr. Walker said, because you read from a prepared statement. I can't ask you the question, but I know that he was reading from a prepared statement too, so we should enclose that into the minutes, so there's a record as to why. I'm going to go with the staff recommendation.
Yeah, I think we need to record the
Yes.
reasons why, and that is the best way to deal with it through the minutes.
So to better understand what you're saying, you're saying that the council's current farm stay accommodation policies could be watered down to a degree by adopting what the state is saying. You would rather have the best of both worlds, to go to community consultation and potentially, at the end of the day, increase opportunities.
Look, yes, so Council adopted a series of controls and provisions around farm stay accommodation a number of years ago, and that went through an extensive process of consultation with local community and the industry to come to what was a broadly supported position on farm stay accommodation. My concern with the panel's recommendation is that it undermines that adopted and supported position. There is an opportunity to come back and revisit those provisions and get them right, but for the time being, I think the appropriate way forward is to maintain the status quo and then come back and revisit those controls through consultation with the industry and community.
Mr. Walker argues that that's already happened.
Yeah, look, there has been significant consultation, and we're not taking away from what was proposed under the existing planning framework. We're saying maintain the existing planning framework. There is an optional new clause which does have some important heads of consideration, and we think there's merit in including that in the LEP. I'm just concerned if we introduce it now without getting those controls right, then we're actually taking away from something that we currently allow and we currently support.
How long would it take to prepare a planning proposal from start to bring it before the council?
Look, it would be a fairly simple planning proposal to get before the council. The total process, including the consultation, I'd anticipate 6 months.
So it's the council's normal practice that planning proposals go through the planning panel before we commence the process. I don't think in these circumstances that's necessary.
It will be necessary by way of the legislative requirements around local planning panels, where they have to, so all planning panels before they go to what's called a gateway determination need to be reported through the panel for them to provide their advice to council. So there will be a legislative requirement to do it, unfortunately.
Look, I'm sorry this is taking so long, but it's important. Would there be a possible, sorry?
To you, Mr. May, would you like the wording that Mr. Park ran through to be brought up on the screen for the sake of clarity?
Yes, please. How long before you would have a planning proposal ready to go before the panel? Look, the bottom line is I'm looking at September this year, when my term finishes, and I just want to make sure that I don't leave an issue.
Yep. Look, I would say definitely before September. I would say it's unlikely we would make it to the May meeting, but definitely we could make it to the June meeting. Importantly about this recommendation that we've put before you is that it continues to allow farm stay accommodation under the existing provisions, and that has been through that consultation. It has been broadly supported by both the community and industry. So we're not taking anything away, but when we do introduce new controls, it gives us a chance to go through that consultation process again.
It's the number 3 that I just would like to know how long it would take to prepare a planning proposal and whether we could call an extraordinary meeting of the panel to get the process moving quicker or quickly.
I will do everything we can to get it to the May meeting. So we will push to have it to the May meeting, which is sort of, the reports are due next week, so I will prioritise it to get it as quickly as possible to the planning panel.
And do they take late items?
I believe through negotiation, yes.
Thank you. Okay, well look, I understand the issues, and I understand the disappointment with the recommendation that came out of the panel, and I think that may, to a degree, have been led by that the panel's professional view is they're not real keen on the Department of Planning just changing model provisions, and we could be a casualty along the way in that area. But look, I think what the staff have now come up with takes us forward. So I would move and this will be the amended officer's recommendation. I think that needs to be clear. 1, 2 and 3 as outlined on the screen, starting with that in relation to the draft standard down to an industry, and declare that carried. Look, I'm sorry to ask you so many questions about this, but it's an important matter. And, thank you. The next item is item 9.2, a planning proposal for the heritage assessment of Myrtle Street, Barrow and Elizabeth Street, Mossvale. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Back to you, Mr. Park.
Thank you. So, Mr. May, the report relates to a planning proposal to list a number of items as heritage items under the Wingecarribee Local Environmental Plan. It likely looks familiar because it came to council last month, and there was an administrative error in the recommendation that was put before you. Just for the sake of just to make sure that we've got everything right, we thought it was worthwhile just coming back to get the recommendation 100% right. So it's just a slight change to the recommendation to ensure that it's adopted by council and not by the local planning panel.
Thank you. In relation to item 9.2, I'd move the officer's recommendation outlined on page 25 of the business paper 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 and declare that carried. Next item is 10.1, consultation on childcare gap waiver fee. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Group Manager, Community and Corporate Services, Ms. Lidgard, will introduce this item.
This report provides feedback from the public exhibition of the proposal to waive gap fees for families using council's out-of-school hours service who have been impacted and required to isolate due to COVID-19. The proposed gap fee waiver is for a period of up to 5 days. The public exhibition was from the 22nd of February through into the 24th of March 2022 and was promoted via Council's community engagement platform, community update and notification to Bush families. One submission was received during the public exhibition period, and this submission was in support of the proposal. As such, this report recommends Council waive the gap fee backdated to the 21st of November 21 to the 30th of June 2022.
Thank you. In relation to item 10.1, consultation on childcare gap waiver fee, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 28 of the business paper and declare that carried. Next item is 10.2, Wingecarribee Adult Daycare.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. May. The Director, Corporate Strategy and Resourcing, Ms. Foster, will introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. May. The purpose of this report is to consider the request from Wingecarribee Adult Daycare to terminate the funding agreement entered into in January 2020. A report was presented to Council on 8th of December 2021, at which time it was resolved that the matter be deferred to ascertain the annual rental payable by the centre for the occupation of its other 2 locations. The Adult Daycare Centre operates from 3 locations across the Shire, being the Caribee Centre in Barrow, the Queen Street Centre in Mossvale and the Colo Vale Village Hall. Details of the rental payments made by WADCC obtained from the managers of those venues are included in this report. This report recommends that Council maintains the current funding agreement with Wingecarribee Adult Daycare Centres Incorporated.
Thank you. In relation to 10.2, the Wingecarribee Adult Daycare, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 31 of the business paper 1 and 2 and declare that carried. Just for clarity. Number 2 is the officers will meet with representatives of the daycare centre to explore options for increasing revenue to enable a repayment schedule to be developed. This is a difficult matter. It's a legacy matter that we've inherited, and hopefully it will be addressed. Next item, 10.3, the visitor servicing project.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. May. To clarify on the report, the author is the Director, Corporate Strategy and Resourcing, and I should have been noted as the authoriser. We're in the process of implementing a new system and we have just a couple of little glitches that we're sorting out. So I'll ask the Director, Corporate Strategy and Resourcing to introduce this item. Thank you.
Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to present to Council an opportunity for Wingecarribee Shire Council to be the pilot organisation for the Destination Sydney South and Surrounds Future-Proofing Visitor Servicing in New South Wales project. Wingecarribee and Destination Southern Highlands have the opportunity to participate in a visitor servicing project being undertaken by DSSS. The timing aligns with Council currently undertaking an organisational review of its services and functions, which includes the tourism and events functions of Council. Destination Southern Highlands has previously utilised a tourism partnership model. However, Council was in the process of investigating alternate models that would support and optimise the visitor economy into the future. DSSS have engaged My Travel Research to undertake 2 phases within the project. In the second phase, it will include an additional industry community workshop, which will be funded by Council to ensure all views are considered as part of the project.
Thank you. The General Manager noted there's a new system. I've got to say, to me, it's much clearer to read business papers with this new system. So well done with that. In relation to this matter, this is a continuation of the reviews that are going on in relation to not only what you could call the Mittagong Centre or the Visitors Centre, but how Council is going to deal in the future with visitors.
That's correct. So we were currently undertaking a review and this opportunity arose to be the pilot organisation. So there's Destination Sydney South and Surrounds will fund the majority of the project, but this will then be used as base data for the other 6 LGAs that are within that region.
And the $2,100 is to provide an opportunity for more, for want of a better word, local input.
That's correct.
Thanks very much for that. Well done. In relation to item 10.3 on page 53 of the business paper, I would move the officer's recommendation 1, 2 and 3 and declare that carried. 10.4.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. May. This will be introduced by the Group Manager, Community and Corporate Services, Ms. Lidgard.
Thank you. This report presents Council with the draft Disability Inclusion and Action Plan and recommends the draft DAP be placed on public exhibition for a period of 28 days. The draft DAP identifies priority areas and specific strategies to make Wingecarribee Shire an accessible and age-friendly community to meet the needs of all people. The plan has been developed in accordance with the state government guidelines. The DAP focuses on 4 areas, which are attitudes and behaviours, livable communities, systems and processes, and employment. This draft is a result of extensive consultation with people with a disability, service providers, carers, the general community, and council staff. Internal meetings were held with a broad range of council staff to address issues raised during the community feedback and developed achievable actions that council will undertake over the next 4 years. It's recommended that the draft DAP be placed on a public exhibition for 28 days and reported back to council in June.
Thank you. In relation to item 10.4, I would move the officer's recommendation outlined on page 56 of the business paper, 1 and 2, and declare that carried. Item 10.5, the draft operational plan and budget 22-23, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. So our Chief Financial Officer, Mr Kuzmanovsky, will introduce the budget and provide some key highlights and features of the draft operational plan and budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The draft 22-23 budget and operating plan and fees and charges have been prepared collaboratively over the past few months with a view of publicly exhibiting for 28 days subject to a council resolution. In preparing the draft 22-23 budget, council officers have incorporated additional information, including the 22-23 budgets and allocated resources by service to provide some additional transparency within the document. The detailed draft budget, capital works budget, has also been appended to the draft 22-23 operational plan. Some of the key highlights that we'd like to cover as a part of the operational plan is a $126 million operating budget, which will provide services to the community and maintaining vital infrastructure to ensure the public is provided with safe infrastructure. A $69.8 million capital works program. Service levels from a revenue perspective, going back to pre-COVID levels, as we can see the last remnants of COVID, the pandemic easing off, so we've forecast our revenue levels back up to pre-COVID levels. In response to the natural disasters that have plagued the LGA since February 22, an allocation of $1.3 million per annum has been prioritised to expand the pothole maintenance crews for 3 years, funded by the deferral of buildings capital works. It is envisaged that with the delivery of over $50 million in capital roads infrastructure over the next 3 years, it would likely to result in the decreased requirement for pothole maintenance once the capital program is complete. It is proposed to review the additional road maintenance crew beyond the 3 years when preparing the 25-26 operational plan. From a revenue perspective, rates are proposed to be increased by 1.2%, subject to a further rates correction of 0.8% subject to an IPAR determination. The total 2% rate increase will align to Council's adopted long-term financial plan, and the rates correction will generate an additional $425,000 in rates revenue for the 22-23 year. Both the 1.2 and 2% scenarios have been tabled in the draft 22-23 operational plan. If Council is unsuccessful in receiving the additional 0.8%, Council will need to reprioritise budget allocations to fund the shortfall. Domestic waste charges have been generally increased by 5% to capture the foreshadowed cost increase with waste-related costs, water and sewer costs by 2% increase, and fees and charges generally by 2%. From a financial perspective, Council's accounting operating result is projected to be a deficit of $2.5 million, excluding capital grants and contributions, whilst delivering a balanced cash budget. It is also forecast that Council will have a working capital position of $5 million as at the end of 30 June 2023. The next steps will see the community engagement commence upon Council resolving to release the operational plan for public consultation. Thank you.
Look, I have literally spent hours going through the budget papers, and I've got a lot of questions. You just answered one in relation to only 3 years for the extra gang,
yes,
in effect for road maintenance, but I just don't agree with you. I think it's going to take millions to fix the roads in this place, and it's the priority issue of residents. I couldn't, this is not a criticism, but I just couldn't come to grips with a recalibration across the whole budget to reflect the community expectations. And as I say, I've got a lot of questions, and I think it might be best if we defer the budget for an extraordinary meeting of the council with a view to going into committee of the whole, so we can deal more informally with it, and in a way also it will show the community how a council can deal with such matters without having briefings. And so there's a formality to it, if I could put it that way. So I regret I'm going to mux things up a bit, but when's the... I will give you a list of flag some of the issues I want to raise, in fairness, because, look, this is an opportunity for me as the council to reflect what I believe the community is saying. And if this goes through without me questioning, I've lost an opportunity for the community, because what happens is the council deals with strategic matters, the general manager and the staff deal with the operational matters. So unless I'm satisfied, it's a lost opportunity for the community, because I'll just be told that, well, that's the money you allocated. And at quarterly statements and the like, you can try, but sometimes that's too late. I'm not being critical in any way. I think what's been happening so far with the revotes, there's already been reports to the council on those kind of matters, taking a far more realistic approach. So if I give you a list of things which we can deal with in public then, so you get a fair warning, when would you be available? I'm available any old time.
To be fair to the finance team and our new CFO, I would suggest an extraordinary meeting on the 4th of May. Yep.
So that's 2 weeks. And in giving notice of an extraordinary meeting, do we also have to give notice as the intention to go into committee of the whole at that meeting, or don't have to do that, just do that at the meeting?
We can do that through the meeting.
Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? That I don't want a briefing, I don't want a workshop. Yep. I want this to be done in public, and it's a new approach to dealing with issues. I think my views on briefings are pretty well known. Okay, well, and I know you've only been here 5 minutes, and I apologise. It's not a reflection on you or your staff. It's just that I've got to be happy, well, I've got to be satisfied on behalf of the residents who I'm representing, that this is being, I'm not saying it's not being done properly, but that the recalibration that I've been trying to get is being achieved. One of the things I did have written down is, what are the issues in the engineering sector that are going to be stalled to fund the $1.3 million. I wasn't really thinking that way. I was thinking about a recalibration. I think there's, the engineering works are very important, but if we're in a committee situation, I can be given more details about that kind of thing. And it'll be broadcast so the community can hear what's going on. So I would move that the draft 2023 operational plan and budget be deferred, so until 4 May at 3:30, to enable clarification of resourcing in services, and for the draft long-term financial plan to be placed on exhibition. That wasn't included in the documentation. At the same time as the draft operational plan and budget. Have you got, please? I declare that carried. Next item is 10.6, draft financial reserves policy, page 264.
Thank you, Mr. May. Back to the CFO, Mr. Kuzmanovsky.
Thank you. This report is to seek endorsement to publicly exhibit the draft financial reserves policy. The Finch report, which was tabled at the ordinary council meeting held on the 12th of May 2021, made the following recommendations and considerations for council in relation to reserves. Adopt a reserves policy that ensures $5 million is available as unrestricted cash for working capital requirements to be set aside as internal restrictions, ensure that the establishment and funding of internal restriction reserves is supported by council resolution, and consider rationalising the number of internal restrictions. In preparation of this draft reserves policy, the council officers have incorporated the above recommendation into the proposed policy. At a summary level, this includes maintaining the number of externally restricted reserves due to their statutory nature, consolidating 34 internally restricted reserves into 13 internally restricted reserves to allow for streamlined cash management reserve projections, and establishing an unrestricted working capital position of $5 million by releasing funds from nominated internally restricted reserves. The draft policy has been tabled to ARIC and discussed and endorsed. Within the attachments, you'll find the current listing, the policy, the current listing of reserves with resolution dates where we could find them, and proposed action for future use of those current reserves, and then the proposed reserve listings with their future forecast balances as at the end of this current financial year and the 22-23 financial year. Thank you.
Thanks. So this report in effect confirms what Finch was saying, that he could not find on occasions resolutions for these reserves to be established.
Correct, that's right.
So the suspicions have been proved.
Correct. Some of them may have been just timing, that they may have been established before we could keep those accurate records, but this gives us that opportunity to say we've got a snapshot, and I guess as a policy we'd now need to review it so we then future-proof that going forward.
Yeah. And I see that you're not the author. This has all happened well before you've arrived.
Yes.
But as a professional who's been a CFO at many councils, you're the spokesperson, so you're obviously relaxed with this, is what's happening?
I am, yes, that's correct. Most of the internally restricted reserves align to where I've been previously, so quite comfortable. Mention that to the executive and conversations with individual ARIC members as well about my thoughts, and quite comfortable with where we're heading with the policy. So,
so I just flag one thing that I'll be raising at the extraordinary meeting is this question of business units. I don't understand how they're business units when they're still covered by a day labour. The council takes all the risk, etc., etc. So I'll give notice that I'll be asking a few questions about them, which appear quite regularly in the budget.
Okay.
Well, I think this has been a long drawn-out process, but we've got to the end, and the points have been proven. It's been thorough, yes. Okay, in relation to item 10.6, I would move the recommendation outlined on page 264 of the business paper, 1 and 2, and declare it carried. The investment report, page 283.
Thank you, Mr. May, and back to Mr. Kuzmanowski. Thank you.
Just in quick summary, statutory investment report that we've tabled. All funds have been invested with in accordance with the policy. There was a acquisition in the financial sector market where members' equity were bought out by Bank of Queensland. So, in terms of our policy from an institutional perspective, we are over our institutional cap limit. We are waiting for those investments to mature as grandfathered investments. Financially, it would be poor financial management for us to cash those investments. We'll receive penalties, financial penalties. So I believe those investments mature sometime in April. So I believe one of them has, and one towards the end of the month. So that was the key highlight of the month. So by the time we get to the end of when we bring this to council next month, we will be back in accordance with our institutional limits.
But one would think we're not the only council caught by that.
I don't believe it would be, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay, in relation to item 10.7, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 283 of the business paper and declare that carried. The next item is 10.8, Council Christmas Festivities.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. May. To the Group Manager, Community and Corporate Services, Ms. Lidgard.
Thank you. This report provides council with feedback on the council-funded and supported Christmas activities held across the Shire during December 2021. During 2021, council contributed additional funds as well as a range of permits and approvals to enhance the celebration of Christmas across the Shire. The aim was to create a festive atmosphere, support the business community and encourage a sense of belonging and place in our towns and villages. Enhancements included new Christmas trees, family-friendly light-up the Christmas tree events, funding to village associations for community-led events, twilight trading and waiving of outdoor dining fees, as well as staff assisting the Business Southern Highlands working group to plan the Festival of Lights that was held at Corbett Plaza in Barrow. Council sought feedback on the festivities via a community survey, consulting with Business Southern Highlands and by seeking feedback from the village associations. This report provides an overview of the feedback. Overall, this report demonstrates support for Council to continue to contribute to Christmas festivities across the Shire, along with some suggested improvements. The report recommends that Council continues to provide additional funding for the celebration of Christmas across the Shire for the 22-23 budget.
I don't know if this is an unfair question, but Wenedford West Park, Mittagong, do you know where it is? Or does anyone know?
That's my understanding. That's the main one in the main street of Mittagong.
Near the
across
church.
The church is my understanding. Yeah.
Does anybody?
Of the locals.
I must say I agree that Leighton Gardens would be a better place for the tree, but I understand the security issues. Also, in the feedback from residents, yet again, there's concerns raised about so many contacts at the council, just not one point of, and it's hard enough for volunteers without trying to travel through the, yes, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. So, very good point, and we've received a lot of feedback from both business and community organisations about some of the complexities around events and organising events. And so the Director Corporate Strategy and Resourcing, her team are leading a process to streamline event planning to assist community and businesses in organising events, and that starts this month and will take a couple of months, but the aim is to provide a good resource and also a single point of contact for people.
Look, I understand the place is being reset, and I'm just highlighting the fact that these are issues that need to be addressed, but you're in front of me. In relation to this item, it doesn't give me any details on expenditure of activities. And I would have thought after the Tulip Festival, which I've deferred also for more information, which hasn't come back yet, I'm interested on behalf of the community on what was spent and whether it was good value. And at the end of the day, whether some of the villages would prefer to use some of this money maybe for New Year celebration, not Christmas celebration. Christmas celebration doesn't cover everybody's interests, if I could put it that way. I'm not suggesting we do it, but I think the community should give you the opportunity to see whether they're interested in doing it. But until we know the true costs for every area, that's very hard to float it. So I would move that this matter be deferred and that an itemised expenditure on activities organised in towns and villages during December 2021 be provided. And that could maybe even come back to the extraordinary meeting. So that's a finance issue. I'm not suggesting we take any money away. I'm just wanting to know where the money was spent and whether the community can see whether they've got value for their money, if that's what they want to do next time. So if that could be called up, please. I think you better put it on Form A, please. Is that achievable? Thank you. Thank you very much. I declare that carried. Next item is 10.9.
Thank you, Mr. May. In the absence of the Coordinator Property Services, the Director Corporate Strategy and Resourcing will be introducing the property-related reports.
Thank you. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to seek resolution of council to abandon previous resolution of council in relation to a right of carriageway over council-owned land in favour of 33 to 37 Station Street, Barrow. Council previously resolved to grant a right of carriageway over the council-owned land in favour of the adjoining private property. The grant of the right of carriageway was proposed as works associated with the proposed Station Street upgrade project would have affected access to that private property. The section of Station Street, the subject of the previous council resolution, is confirmed to be in the section of the Station Street upgrade project cancelled via council resolution of 12th May 2021. Accordingly, access to the private property will no longer be affected and the right of carriageway is no longer required. This report recommends council note that the previous resolution be formally abandoned.
I found this an interesting report because notwithstanding the original Station Street proposals, access to private property across public freehold property is unusual. What were or do you know the circumstances, how we got there, or did the owner approach us, or did we approach the owner, or?
Mr. May, my understanding is that when the access to the property was to be affected, that council would have given an opportunity for a right of carriageway over council's land to provide access. That was considered by a independent valuer because there was still, it was benefiting a property and burdening council's property. Therefore, there was a consideration of money at the time. However, at the council meeting, it was decided to give the right of carriageway for no consideration at all. Yeah.
Just add to that, Mr. May. So, as outlined in the report on page 318, a report was presented to council at its meeting on the 23rd of March 2016. In that report contained details of an independent valuation. Our understanding is at that meeting the council resolved to enter into a closed session. And upon completion of that, the resolution of the council on the 23rd of March 2016 was that council confirmed that no cash contribution is to be made by the owner of 33 to 37 Station Street for the provision of access over council land. We're not aware of the reasoning behind that. That was the resolution of the council of the day.
And that was dealt with in closed council.
That's correct.
Yeah, well, I'm not entitled to those closed council, but can I, by resolution, open those minutes?
Through to you, Mr. May. As I understand, we've reviewed those minutes and it is not clear as to why that resolution was made.
But and it's dealt with in closed. So, as an operational matter, you have the access, I don't. Can we come back to this matter? Could Ms. Liggard give some thought to an item of how this can be opened? I'm very interested in whether there was a valuation. You said there was. What was the valuation? You can't tell me. By virtue it was dealt with in closed council, but if there's a mechanism to open those minutes at the next meeting, you see where I'm coming from?
Through to you, Mr. May, we can provide a further information report at the next meeting. As I understand, the valuation or some details of the valuation were included in the report that was on open council, but the council, when it considered the matter, moved into closed session. However, we can bring back a further report with further details to the next meeting.
So, number two, that council seek legal advice, because I think you'd need to seek legal advice on this, because if it's just not simply opening a file, if it's dealt with a closed council.
I'd suggest, Mr. May, if we bring back a report, and then if that report does not satisfy the information, and we need to obtain legal advice, we will.
So you can obtain legal advice on the way through. My intent is to open the file, open the minutes of the closed session, to find out what happened as best we can. Yeah. So it's number 2, that the General Manager report to the next meeting of Council on, what was the date of the closed meeting?
Mr. May, it was the 23rd of March 2016 report.
It's a long time ago, but this is potentially another cost which hasn't been disclosed previously in relation to the now abandoned Station Street.
I would suggest that we bring the report back,
Okay, right.
with the details. Thank you.
So what's your suggested number 2?
I would suggest, if you're of the mind, to move that point 2 be that a further report be provided to the next ordinary meeting of Council, providing details of the report to the Council on the 23rd of March 2016 in relation to the right of carriageway, and just list the DP.
But we're still... It's number 2. You're abandoning any earlier decision. And number 2, so we just might just wait for that to come up. Are we on delay? Like talkback radio.
Probably need.
So the recommendation will be one that provision of a right-of-way in favour of 3337 Station Street, Barrow, as provided in 13916, be formally abandoned. 2, a further report be provided to the next ordinary meeting of Council relating to the minutes from 23 March 2016.
Could I just suggest if we also add in then relating to the minutes from the 23rd of March 2016, when the matter relating to the right of carriageway over council property, and then list the 2 lots and DP numbers.
sorry to those here who might be viewing, but this is important. This is new territory for me. Endeavouring to open minutes from a closed session. Is that, you didn't want to put the DP numbers, are you happy with that?
Sorry, through Mr. May, it should read a further report to be provided to the next ordinary
I was
meeting.
slating, I think, for the...
Yeah.
Yep.
Meeting. Okay,
That covers it?
thank you.
Okay. You might just put that up the top, one provision to say... Oh, no, that's okay. All right. As numbered there, 1 and 2, I declare that carried. 10.10.
Through Mr. May, to the Director Corporate Strategy and Resourcing.
Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to seek resolution of council to enter into a lease with Southern Highlands Storm Rugby League Club for the use of council property being Park Clubhouse, the upper level, Community Oval, Donkin Avenue, Mossvale. Southern Highlands Storm Rugby League Club was created in late 2019 after the merging of Mossvale and Barrow Junior and Senior clubs, as well as the Robertson Junior Club.
Thank you. In relation to item 10.10, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 322 of the business papers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and declare that carried. 10.12.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. May. I think it's 10.11.
Is it? Sorry.
And no, you're fine.
My apologies.
And if I could just ask the Director Corporate Strategy and Resourcing again.
So, Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to seek a resolution of council to reclassify council land being the site of the Mount Gibraltar Telecommunication Tower at 232 Oxley Drive, Barrow, from community to operational. The site is currently used for the operational purposes with several commercial uses of the tower, including emergency services, local broadcasters and the like. To legitimise council's use of the site for operational purposes, it is proposed that a planning application be made to reclassify the property to align with its current use. Details of the process required for the reclassification is outlined in the report.
In relation to this matter, you seem to be reclassifying a lot of land to operational land when you could do a subdivision and access handle. Have you given any thought to that?
Mr. May, we hadn't. That will delay the process somewhat, but it is something that could be done.
Yeah. Is there... Look, I have a view on community land and operational land, and I think this is prime real estate. And I understand why you're doing this in relation to where the assets are, but is there an operational reason why we're doing it at the moment, or just cleaning up?
No, there's an operational reason, because it's community land. The operational activities shouldn't be undertaken on the site, so we need, from a legal perspective, to tidy that up.
But how long's it been like that for?
I understand for quite some time.
So if I defer it for a month, so you can give some thought to doing a subdivision with an access handle?
Yes, we can undertake that.
Does the planning... Mr. King, you got any view on that, or no, Mr. Park?
Mr. May, not if the concern of the community is that we're reclassifying it to operational and we can limit that to the area directly affected, I think it'll be entirely possible.
Look, the reality is no one's raised it with me, but I have an eye, I'm afraid, for this kind of stuff, operational and community land, and I'd be more comfortable if we deferred it for a month, but if the professional officers, after consultation with each other, thought that it was in the best interest to do a plan of subdivision, I don't think it's necessary to come back and tell me, just do it, and then come back with the... So, can I move that this matter be deferred and the General Manager be delegated authority They're not coming up on the screen. That's a problem with the new system, is it?
So it can only come up once it's saved.
Ah, yeah, sometimes I need to reread. What did I say?
That the matter be deferred.
Okay, that the matter be deferred and the General Manager be delegated authority to prepare a plan of subdivision for the land to limit the need for a portion of the site to be reclassified. And then if that was to occur, it would just come back when the plan of subdivision's finished to classify as operational the handle and where the asset is, or assets are. So, is that clear from that? I declare that carried. Next item is 1012, Ellen Street, Barrow.
Yep, thank you, Mr. May. Last one, I think, for the Director of Corporate
Yeah,
Strategy
been a
and
busy lady.
Resourcing.
Yes, Mr May, the purpose of this report is to seek council approval for the closure of part of an unformed road adjoining Mount Gibraltar Reserve, being part Ellen Street, Barrow, and to undertake community consultation in relation to the proposed closure. Further, council approval is sought to endorse an application to the New South Wales Department of Planning and Environment, Crown Lands, to transfer management of the section of Dean Street, Barrow and Bright Street, Barrow from Crown to council. Given the significance of them to the Gibraltar Reserve, preparation of a plan of management dealing solely with the community land contained within the Mount Gibraltar Reserve is required. Several property actions have been identified to be undertaken prior to the development of the plan of management, including closure of the unformed roads within the reserve. The area of the roads upon closure will be consolidated with the adjoining Heritage Reserve prior to finalisation of the plan of management, which will apply to the whole of the site.
Thank you. In relation to item 10.12, I would move the officer's recommendation outlined on page 333 of the business paper, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and declare that carried. Item 10.13, generic plans of management for bushland.
Thank you, Mr May. The Manager of Assets, Mr Robinson, will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr May. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's endorsement for the submission of the Natural Areas Plan of Management to Crown Lands for their review and approval. In accordance with the Local Government Act and Crown Land Management Act, councils are required to develop plans of management for all community and Crown land under their responsibility. The purpose of the plan of management is to further categorise the land more specifically, and then to develop guidelines or action plans to ensure the effective management of the land in accordance with that more specific categorisation. The potential categorisations under the Local Government Act are either park, sports field, general use, cultural significance or natural area. This plan of management will enshrine the categorisation of 15 council reserves and 14 Crown reserves as natural area bushland. This categorisation is in accordance with the Wingecarribee Park strategy, which was adopted by Council November 2006. Through this enshrinement of the natural area bushland category, it will ensure the continued preservation of these areas and the environmental benefits that they generate. Because there is the 14 Crown reserves included in the plan of management in accordance with the Crown Land Managers Act, Crown Lands must now review and then approve the proposed plan of management, and so that is the purpose of this report. Upon Crown Lands approval, they will then be reported back to Council again for subsequent public exhibition and then hopeful final adoption by Council.
I see you weren't the author or the authoriser, and I don't want to be unfair, so I don't know really who this question should go to. Balmoral Reserve at Balmoral is very well known to me. Is it known to you?
Yes, I'm familiar.
I note that it's not being included until there's further independent assessments done down there. And I don't know Commemoration Park, but it says it's nearby Balmoral Reserve. I've never been there. But this seems to be taking an eternity, and I know it's an issue at the village. Is it possible, I understand why you're not including it, but is it possible for a status report and timeline to be provided to Council on Balmoral Reserve and nearby Commemoration Park?
Yes, that is possible. Commemoration Park, I believe, is the one just to the south of the hall that's opposite Balmoral Reserve there.
South or the north?
South, I believe.
Yeah. Well, if you're happy, I'm happy with that slight amendment then to number 3. If we can add in Balmoral Reserve and Commemoration Park. I think the status report and timeline on plans of management, because we're going to have to do a plan of management before you do anything. Thank you. So in relation to item 10.13, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 333 of the business paper, 1, 2 and the 3 as is on the screen, and declare that carried. Pardon me. 10.14, the Black Summer bushfires accommodation matter. Pardon? Okay. Volume 2. The intent of this recommendation is to give surety to those who have been badly affected. Thank you. In relation to item 10.4, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 494 of the business paper, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and 5 is A to H, and declare that carried. 10.15, Chelsea Gardens and Kumungi overview report.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. May. Just to clarify again, the author of the report was the Director Communities in Place, and I should have been noted as the authoriser. I'll ask the Director, Mr. King, to outline this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Chelsea Gardens Kumungi overview report has been prepared to set out a comprehensive timeline relating to the proposal, identify actions taken and lessons learned from the rezoning and development application process for the long-standing Chelsea Gardens Kumungi development proposal at Mossvale. The report covers, with the assistance of a range of staff, the records and decisions relating to the rezoning and various development applications made for the site over the period of 2005 to 2022. The report also makes a range of observation and comments relating to this as a useful case study for the importance of effective and appropriate strategic land use planning and effective long-term infrastructure planning.
You raised the question of case study. To me, this is a case study in how not to do it. You haven't got a comment on that. But look, this took a long time to come. This was first raised with me at a Mossvale community meeting, and I now understand why it took so long. It's been complex, it's been thorough, and I appreciate the work of all the staff, and I'm no doubt the community will too, in better understanding how the council got into this situation. There is one other thing that concerns me. Has the council's obviously missed the boat on stage 1 in relation to what the council's now working on with updating contributions plans, but based on evidence, and that's going to take some time, I appreciate. But if there are further stages, will the opportunity come for that development to contribute to the better good of the Shire, if I can put it that way? My words, not yours. I don't know what the town planning terminology is.
Through the Administrator, yes, as each of the relevant and subsequent stages of the development application take place, Section 711 levies will be applied to the subsequent stages and are being applied to the current first stage as well. The determination has not yet been made on the application, so it's currently with the Regional Planning Panel, but within the draft conditions of consent there is a resolution to apply the current 711 plans as it would apply to any other development. So the answer is we haven't missed the opportunity for the current stage 1, and we will apply the contributions plans in the future to future stages as they come to for assessment.
Did you say we have missed the opportunity for stage one?
No, we haven't. There is a draft condition of consent that would apply the current Section 11 plans to this site for stage
Yeah,
one.
but the current
Yes,
current plans,
Current
which
plans.
I think everyone agrees are wanting.
To Mr May, there is a need to update, and as council would be aware, we're undertaking a range of strategic work. We have the Community and Rec strategic plan underway. We've commissioned an integrated transport strategy, and they'll be informing strategies to an updated developer contributions framework.
So the lots that have been sold already or under contract, well, I read in the paper and in this report it doesn't say under contract, but they would be sold subject to the approval of the plans for stage one that are currently with the regional panel.
That's correct.
I want to add a number 3. It be noted that council will be in a position to levy any development contribution fee that is current if future applications are submitted for additional stages of the subject site. I build that in because I think there's a community view that the council's missed the boat totally. But what you're saying is any valid contribution plan that the council has in place at the time will be applied. Thank you. In relation, and again I congratulate, I think it's necessary to put in the report, but it's very thorough and well done to everybody concerned. In relation to item 10.15 on page 498 of the business paper, I would move the officer's recommendation 1 and 2 and add 3 as on the screen and declare that carried. Item 10.16, the plastics recycling.
Yes, thank you, Mr May. I'll ask Mr Park, the exec manager.
I might gazump him if that's all right.
Strategic outcomes, just to introduce the report, but acknowledge that it's been a team effort between Communities in Place, the environment team and strategic outcomes.
I'm happy to do it if that's okay. I mean, I have prepared notes with Michael on this. This report provides an update on the state significant development applications for a plastic recycling facility proposal to council and the community. The proposal relates to a waste plastic sorting and plastics recycling facility in the southeastern portion of the Southern Highlands Innovation Park. The development is being assessed by the New South Wales Department of Planning and Environment. The EIS was on exhibition from the 23rd of February to the 22nd of March 2022, and Council obtained an extension of time to make a formal submission. The draft submission from Council setting out the Council's concern relating to the EIS and the proposal is attached to the report, and subject to the endorsement of the Council will be forwarded to the Department of Planning as Council's official position on the environmental impact statement and the proposal.
This is another matter where there has been enormous community angst, if I could put it that way, and concerns have been expressed that the council has been so slow in responding. And if I could just say, the reason for that, in my view, or my understanding, was the EIS and then doing it thoroughly. I don't know if the General Manager wants to say anything.
I would, if you don't mind, Mr Mayor. I might ask Mr Park, because he has been fielding and supporting the community throughout the process in terms of providing advice in relation to understanding the process and fielding a lot of the community's concerns. And if, Mr. Park, if you could just outline how we've incorporated that into our submission and how we'll close the loop and communicate the outcome. Thank you.
Look, thank you, and through the chair. So you're right, it has been significant concerns raised in the community, and council have received a lot of representation about this matter. We've been really clear with the community and with the proponents that we weren't going to I guess make council's position on the EIS until we'd undertaken a thorough assessment of the application. There is a significant amount of work that's gone into this, and it required enough time for council to fully understand the issues and understand the impacts of a development of this nature before we could form a position one way or the other. It has involved all of the groups of council providing input into the relevant aspects of the assessment, and ultimately, while the staff are supportive of plastics recycling generally, it's really important that it's on the right site and at the right time, and the infrastructure capacity is there to support a development of this nature. So there were concerns raised from the different groups of council about the capacity of our infrastructure networks to accommodate the development at this stage. There's also concerns that the location of the development is inconsistent with our overall planning framework for that area, which looks at lower impact uses on the periphery of the residential areas. We did, on the back of some of the concerns raised by the community, held an information session for the community. And it wasn't about forming a view one way or another on the application. It was about providing the community with the information that they needed to make sure that they could go through the appropriate channels to have an influence over the project, whether they supported or opposed it. It was making sure the community really understood what the process was, because I think there's an expectation that you can write a submission to council and that's your formal submission. So we just wanted to be really clear with the community about what the proper process was. Following the resolution or the resolution tonight, we will firstly make our submission to the Department of Planning, provided it's endorsed. We will then write to all of the landowners who have made submissions to council to advise them of the outcome of tonight's meeting. And we've also committed to attaching all of the submissions, redacted copies of the submissions that council have received, to reflect what the community's concerns are about this development as part of our submission to the Department of Planning.
Look, one of the reasons why I raised this is I've been under a bit of pressure, you're conscious of it, myself, to come out one way or the other. And in my view, as in effect the mayor and council, if I'd have come out one way or the other, I'd have to declare an interest when this matter came before the council. That's, in my view, very, very clear under the Code of Conduct and other issues. So I was awaiting the professional officer's view. It was at that stage you can then, having considered everything, make your view known. My view is going to be to support the professional officers. I think you've done a fantastic job on this. And I just hope the community understands the process, and the days of taking sides early and declaring your hand should not occur. It's as simple as that. Could I also ask that this report, and perhaps the Comanche report also, goes to people who we have email addresses for, who attended the consultation night I had here, because there's only three things people want to talk about, or four things. Potholes first, the so-called Mossvale bypass, the plastics factory, and Comanche. So I think by the time we're dealt with the budget, potholes will be, well, the next item too, will be on the way, so we're catching up. But it wouldn't be a bad idea if you could also send both reports to email addresses we have of people who attended that meeting would be helpful. Okay, in relation to item 10.16 on page 594 of the business paper, I would move the officer's recommendation 1, 2, 3 and 4 and declare that carried. And well done to everybody concerned. Oops, I've gone too far. The next item is 10.17, Old South Road.
So Director, Service and Project Delivery, Ms Targa.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr May, Old South Road is a 15-kilometre local road that connects the Old Hume Highway in Alpine to the residential areas of Mittagong and Barrow. The current annual average daily traffic is estimated at around 6,000 vehicles a day, and this is only expected to increase given the significant residential development around Mittagong, Barrow and Mossvale. As a result of the high volume of traffic, the age of the road and the underlying design flaws, the road is currently in a deteriorated state. Council in 2020 commenced the design phase for the renewal of Old South Road from Merrigang Street, Barrow to Old Merton Road, Merrigang. This 9.5 kilometre segment has been identified as being of very poor condition, with pavement failure present for the entire length. Detailed design for the project is nearing finalisation, with the consultant anticipated to complete the design and tender package by the end of May. The detailed design will be available on the Council website. As per the recommendation of this report, a tender will be subsequently released in June 2022 for the engagement of a contractor to undertake the works. The total project cost for the design and construction of the Old South Road renewal project are estimated at around $21 million. This report is to resolve the funding arrangements to enable Council to proceed with tendering the project once the documentation is complete.
And the forward financial plan makes provision for the 23-24 contributions?
It doesn't currently, but the proposed budget does propose that, but seeing the exhibition period for the budget, we won't have that in place before we would like to call the tender, hence this report.
Does the draft?
Yes, it does.
It has it?
Yes.
But the question was in relation to the following year.
Yes, the draft budget does have that.
Yeah. Look, this is a bit of a hallelujah moment because if this road is unbelievable and it's only been made worse by the storms. And I'm no road engineer, but I still maintain that if this road is improved, it's going to take traffic out of the centre of Barrow, because if you're coming from Mossvale, I forget the name, Edridge Park Road, I think it is, which is there's a lot of work going on there at the moment too. So anyhow, look, I'm very pleased that the monies are there, is what you're saying. Yeah. So well done to everybody concerned. I know you've got a whole team behind you working on this, but well done to everybody. In relation to item 10.17, Old South Road, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 611 of the business paper 1 and 2 and declare that carried, and I would urge you to get a press release out as quickly as you can. Item 10.18, construction of 7 bridges.
Thank you, Mr May. To the Group Manager, Capital Works, Mr Tripkovic. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr May, the purpose of this report is to present the evaluation of the request for tender for the construction of 7 bridges. In 2015, Council commissioned a report into the condition of its timber bridge structures, and subsequently in July 2021 accepted government funding from the Fixing Country Bridges program for the replacement of 4 bridges within the Shire. These bridges include Burrawang Creek Bridge on Belmore Falls Road in Wilds Meadow, Diamond Fields Road Bridge in Mittagong, Ritter Creek Bridge on Myrtle Road in Myrtle, and Mittagong Creek Bridge on Merrigang Street in Barrow. The Fixing Country Bridges funding deed conditioned that councils conduct a joint tender process for the procurement of certain items and activities. This condition took into consideration the vast scope across the entire state's funding program, consisting of over 400 bridges. As such, Wingecarribee Shire Council and Upper Lachlan Shire Council entered into a memorandum of understanding for the procurement of the construction of the 7 bridges. Based on the construction type and location, Wingecarribee Shire and Upper Lachlan Shire Councils formulated 3 separable portions for the tender, and tenderers could submit for any or all of these separable portions. The tender was advertised from 22nd February to 22nd March of 2022, with a total of 10 tender submissions for the 3 separable portions, 4 of which were non-compliant in relation to mandatory criteria. All tenders were considered in accordance with the Local Government Act, the regulations and Council's procurement policy. Tender pricing ranged from 1.71 million to 2 million for separable portion 1, 1.049 million to 1.28 million for separable portion 2, and 1.97 million to 2.5 million for separable portion 3. The tender evaluation panel included an independent representative as well as a chief financial officer to oversee the probity and procurement, and have recommended that the following submissions demonstrated a thorough understanding of the requirements, the project and associated time constraints. Separable portion 1 is to be recommended to be awarded to Bridge and Civil Proprietary Limited for $1.714 million. Separable portion 2 is to be recommended to be awarded to Breffney Proprietary Limited for $1.049 million. And separable portion 3 is in relation to Upper Lachlan Shire Council and does not form part of this report. As outlined in the report, there is also a funding shortfall of $340,000. As such, this report further recommends an additional allocation of $340,000 from the 22-23 Culverts and Bridges program and the 22-23 Range Road Renewal Projects. Funds are available within these funding sources, and considering the criticality of these projects and the tight grant timelines, it is recommended to proceed as reported, including resolving to award separable portion 1 to Bridge and Civil and separable portion 2 to Breffney.
In relation to the shortfall in funding, have those shortfalls been built into next year's budget and the forward financial plan, so it's covered?
Yes, they have. A strategy has been identified.
Thank you very much. Look, this is in no way a criticism, but the tender evaluation panels, I wasn't talking when I was asking for independence about having an independent from a different section of the council. Look, I'm relaxed about how the tenders are done, but there's a perception, potentially, which I want to address, that we need a governance independent person from a panel we could establish. Is there going to be a report coming to council soon on that one?
Through you, Mr. May, we are working on that. So what we are proposing, which we will outline in a report, is where we have large tenders that we engage an independent probity person. Where we have smaller tenders, it's still important, I believe, to have someone outside of the division that is called the tender to provide that level of independence, and that has come from either the finance team or procurement or the finance team.
So you'll be, what's the word? Tiering it, yeah. Because some of these are big tenders, and again, this is not a criticism of the staff. I think the amount of work that's going on is enormous at the moment. But I just want to, if we're not going to go into closed council about these, and my expectation when the council returns, they won't either. But they need to have surety that the matters are appropriately, well, there's no perceptions, if I could put it that way. Okay, in relation to item 10.18, I would move the officer's recommendation on page 615 of the business paper, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8, and declare that carried. 10.19, General Manager.
Through Mr. May, we've got a lot of tenders at the moment. So the Acting Group Manager, Water and Sewer, Mr. Mellor, will introduce this item. Thank you.
Mr. May, this report presents the evaluation of the request for tender for the supply and installation of a Venturi aeration system. At the Mossvale sewage treatment plant, in the secondary treatment phase, A deficiency in the aeration capacity was identified in the sewage treatment process. To resolve this issue, prior to a full plant upgrade planned for 2024, Council engaged a wastewater treatment consultant to advise of potential options, and the specific Venturi aeration system was selected as the preferred solution. Council requested tenders for the provision of this technology. During the tender process, participating contractors raised questions about the aeration capacity of the proposed technology, and it was confirmed by the new licence holder of the Venturi system that the proposed system would be insufficient to meet the specified aeration needs prescribed in that tender. To meet the prescribed requirements would entail doubling the Venturi system capacity with an anticipated doubling of cost, far in excess of the allocated budget capacity of the project. With this in mind, the operational team have created an interim solution to the original issue, the installation of new aeration monitoring on site, and a change in process techniques have been applied operationally to maximise the existing plant and have been successful in making up the deficiency in aeration. So it is proposed that the Mossvale STP be managed in this way in the short term until the full upgrade is completed, which is scheduled for 2024. This option presents best value for money to the community. As such, the tender panel recommends that all tenders are rejected based on the new licence holder's confirmation that they will not guarantee the originally prescribed Venturi aeration system to meet the specified aeration needs written in the tender.
Thank you for that. In relation to item 10.19, I'd move the officer's recommendation outlined on page 623 of the business paper and declare that carried. And you've been here the whole time for that. Sorry. Oh, you're going okay. Next item is 10.20, Station Street.
Thank you, Mr. May. I'll ask the Director Service and Project Delivery, Ms. Targa, to outline this tender report.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to present the evaluation of the request for tender for stormwater drainage and car park construction in Station Street in Barrow. The land west of Station Street, between Barrow Street and Bulwee Street, is currently an unmaintained open area with an open drainage system. This project will formalise the open channels into an underground pipe network with construction of a sealed car park above the drainage system. The works will be a significant improvement to the stormwater drainage and car parking in this section of the Barrow Central Business District. The proposed resolution enables Council to enter into a contract for the works and to commence construction.
In effect, the Station Street is now having works, will now have works at both ends, so it's well and truly underway.
The Station Street project has been divided in 4 different projects, which is like the water main relocation and renewal, which has been resolved by Council. This project, then there's another reconstruction of the roadway project, and there's also a car park on the other side of the Barrow area. So there's 4 different projects.
And are we still on the timeline, or was this slipping out a bit?
We indicated that we would have all projects completed by October, which is probably a little bit optimistic, but we're not far off.
Thank you. And I note that the recommended contractor is a local firm. In relation to item 10.2, I would move the officer's recommendation outlined on pages 1, 2 and 3 of the business paper and declare that carried. And can I suggest we issue a press release on this one too? It's a good news story. A lot of people have been concerned about the open drains and about the weather we've been having. If you wouldn't mind. Next item is 10.12, the Civic Centre Refurbishment Report.
Thank you, Mr. May. To the Group Manager, Capital Works, Mr. Tripkovic. Thank you.
Mr May, the purpose of this report is to provide council and the broader community with the final position of the Civic Centre refurbishment project. The report outlines the overall project budget inclusive of the original $9.26 million and the additional $850,000 for the Civic wing and storage area works. On 20 October 2021, council terminated the contract with Matrix Group Co. following significant breaches of the contract. Council elected to manage the finalisation works in-house through the engagement of local contractors and current vendor panel arrangements. These works included unfinished scope, defect rectifications, compliance-related matters, and items including electrical works, heating, ventilation, cooling, fire services, internal and external construction, landscaping and general building works. On 10 November 2021, Council was advised that Matrix Group Co. was placed into liquidation. It has been advised that the liquidation process will be lengthy and possibly take years to resolve. Council has lodged as a creditor to the liquidation process since costs associated with the finalisation of scope are in excess of the remaining contract amount. The results of the liquidation will be brought to Council in a separate report once concluded. The tables in the report summarise project financials, including pre- and post-termination expenditure. The figures depicted are inclusive of all committed costs, not yet fully realised, which provide confidence that the total remaining budget will deliver savings in the order of what is presented. It is noted that considering the complications and complexities surrounding the project, the final closeout position presents a minor saving within the overall budget and demonstrates Council's diligence in managing the project and its finances. As per the Interim Administrator's request for a report into the Civic Centre project, all financials have been reviewed by the Management Accountant and furthermore certified by the Chief Financial Officer and myself, the Group Manager, Capital Projects. The project team would also like to thank staff and the community for their support and patience for what has been a very challenging project.
The sad reality, though, is that the principal project outcome, as detailed in the Council's capital expenditure review to the Office of Local Government, in my view, has not been achieved. And this is no reflection on you. I've got a couple of questions. My calculations are that variations to the initial contract were 27%. When you exclude works in the Civic wing, it takes it down to 14%. Is 14% high or low on a project that was supposed to be scoped, specified and tenders called?
Mr May, typically when we're developing a project, we allow, depending on the level of documentation, but a fully documented project such as this, we typically allow between 7.5% and 10% contingency.
So it's a little bit over.
It's a little bit over, and considering the age and the conditions we found in this building, it's not surprisingly over what we would have expected.
But my position is that it hasn't achieved the objective. And if you go to page 4 of the Council's submission to the Office of Local Government, I've noted in the covering email, the document will be submitted to the Office of Local Government under the General Manager's signature, ideally before the tender is formally considered by Council next Wednesday, which is another argument, but we'll forget that argument. But it says here, there's been concerns regarding the deterioration of the building since the early 2000s, you can't argue that, and despite hang on, I've got the wrong here. Here it is. Council has proposed, this is what they said to the Office of Local Government in November 19, Council is proposing to undertake this project because the existing building has significant maintenance issues, is energy inefficient, does not meet current standards for accessibility, is overcrowded, and is inconsistent with current workplace health and safety standards. In my view, the project has not achieved that outcome. You haven't got to say anything because you're in a difficult situation. This is my view. does the $48,974.42 that are left, is that net of what it cost to change this room?
Mr May, the costs associated with the modifications to this chamber are included in those figures, so we would have had a larger saving if this wasn't undertaken.
Well, again, in my view, there is no way that the $48,947.42 is going to fund what has to be done back of house. Is that a fair?
I think that is a very fair comment.
So, and I've given this, look, I spent a lot of time on this agenda on the weekend, and I am determined to ensure that people who work in this place have accommodation that is worthy of this shire and the employees they have here. So, thank you for the report, and this is in no way a reflection on the impossible task you were given, which you've come through the other side on, thankfully. But I'm going to move, and I've already given this to the Minute Secretary, number 3, noting that the Council's capital expenditure review of November 2019 to the Office of Local Government states, quote, Council is proposing to undertake this project because the existing building has significant maintenance issues, comma, is energy inefficient, comma, does not meet current standards for accessibility, comma, is overcrowded and is inconsistent with current workplace health and safety standards, end of quote. The General Manager undertake an audit of staff areas and a report be provided for funding of same and investigate the opportunity to increase the Mossvale Library floor space to ensure compliance with state standards with a view to the works being undertaken during the next financial year. It's more work, I know, but it's got to be done. So in relation, I move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 6. Sorry, you happy? Or?
Sorry, Mr May, just to add, I totally support that, and I just wish to also draw your attention to the resolution of Council on the 8th of December, where Council was also resolved Council undertake the refurbishment of the rear of the area of the Civic Centre, including replacing windows, carpet, painting interior, and review of office design layout, and review the budgetary and funding impacts. So it's certainly consistent with the resolution, and I just want to echo, I think that the group manager did an amazing job under incredibly difficult circumstances and navigating successfully a number of complex issues and coming out with a positive result. And also thank the director as well, particularly in that liquidation phase. So thank you.
And they're still smiling.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, the $50,000 that's left is going to go nowhere near this. And I'm talking about more than just windows and carpet. The employees in this place are entitled to a proper workplace to work in, and I think that with the expectation of residents too. And I'm not suggesting that they have space like is in the area that I occupy, which is ridiculous. But you know, something has to be done, and we need to do an audit. And it's another reason why I was deferring the budget, and it's on my list of things that it's going to have to be done by loan, and it's going to be substantial. And so you're going to have to get your heads together to make sure that's included in the next year's budget, because you just can't leave the situation like it is at the moment. It's embarrassing. So I would move the officer's recommendation on page 637, 1 and 2, and add that number 3, which is on the screen, and declare that carried. Item 10.2. Excuse me, give you a bit of paper so I can go into the minutes, please, or will you email it to us?
Yes, I'll email
Yeah, it's important because it just shows, I shouldn't be doing this, but I don't want him to escape. It shows the consultation that has occurred, and I think that's important for the panel to understand. Thank you. Sorry about that, I was not supposed to do that, but didn't want him to escape. Olive oil water main.
Thank you, Mr May. Welcome back, Mr Mellor.
Thank you. Mr May, this report presents the evaluation of the request for tender for Coalvale water main distribution pipework upsizing. Council carries out an annual water mains upgrade and renewal programme driven by condition and levels of service requirements. A length of existing 100mm diameter water main along Pine Street and Wattle Street in Coalvale have been selected for upgrading to 200mm diameter based on alleviating hydraulically modelled flow restrictions during peak demand in the local distribution network. In addition to these upsize works, a length of existing 200mm asbestos cement trunk water main is included in these works as a size-for-size renewal to facilitate drainage works along Jasmine Street. This asbestos water main is being renewed in advance of these drainage works due to the anticipation that the trunk main will be easily damaged during the construction phase of the drainage works. The total length of main being renewed and upsized is 420 metres, proposed to be replaced by open trenching method, which proved to be the best value construction method from the tender responses. Tenders received ranged from 355,000 to 482,000, and the tender panel recommends that the tender be awarded to, do I say the name of the contractor?
Yeah.
To Killard Infrastructure Services, utilising open trenching at $355,169.24 as the best value for the community.
Thanks for that. In relation to item 10.22, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 643 of the business paper, 1, 2 and 3, and declare that carried. And General Manager, I think staff who have already dealt with their matters could almost go home if they wanted to, couldn't they? Oh, okay. How do you know? I could have a lot to go yet. Sorry. 10.23.
Thank you, Mr May. The Acting Manager Business Services, Mr McAllister, will introduce this item, his first appearance in the chamber.
Mr May, this report outlines the urgent works that were undertaken to remove some public safety issues and also stabilise the green waste processing area at the Resource Recovery Centre. These works were undertaken at the start of the 21-22 financial year. The works resulted in 1,240 tonnes of soil being stockpiled for disposal following appropriate testing. This testing has now been completed with the soil being classified as non-producible general waste. The Resource Recovery Centre has a licence for 26,600 tonnes of waste, and with that waste on site has 22% of capacity remaining.
I just don't want to cut you off, but have we lost... We've got a... Sorry, pardon? We're fine. Sorry, I lost the screen and we've got a, what do you call it? Live stream the meeting, and I thought we'd lost it, but I apologise.
I'll continue.
Yeah.
With the removal of the excavated soil, it will increase capacity on site by 5%. Due to the volume of waste and the potential costs, it is proposed to undertake an open market tender to ensure best value of money is achieved for Council. A report will be provided to Council on the outcome of the tender and detail the funding arrangements.
So the tender's likely to be over the amount. Yeah, look, I would like to add a number 4 to this, that arrangements be made for the interim administrator to undertake a site visit. No need to write it down. This is another so-called business unit. I just don't understand how these business units work. They're not off balance sheet, so I'm just interested. So in relation to item 10.23, I would move the officer's recommendation on page 648 of the business paper, 1, 2, 3 and 4 and declare that carried. Thanks. I'm sorry about your long wait for that. The audit risk and improvement that's not being introduced. I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 654 of the business paper and declare that carried. And if I could ask just offline, 10.2, the internal ombudsman, the shared service you've introduced with Wollongong Council, if there could be a press release issued about that. I don't know. I see it's on the website, but I don't know whether residents know the availability of that service now. 10.25, the Country Mayors Association. I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 680 of the business paper and declare that carried. And 10.26, the Illawarra Academy of Sport, a housekeeping matter. I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 690 of the business paper. I'm sorry that this meeting's taken so long, but we've covered a lot of ground, and we would have been here for a few more hours with the budget. So I'm sorry to get everybody back, but I think it's important. And I was hoping on when we deal with the budget, the presentations that we're given at the workshop, I think would benefit anybody who's watching about what goes on and what is proposed to occur next year. I'm not suggesting any of that change. I'm just more interested in how the resourcing happens and full-time equivalents, headcounts in different areas in particular. General Manager, before we close the meeting?
I'll be very quick. Thank you, Mr. May. Just 2 items. Last night our area experienced yet another major storm event which resulted in a number of areas in Mossvale, Robertson, Exeter and Berrima experiencing power outages and damage, and throughout the night and today the local energy provider has been working to restore power. Our local emergency services, the Southern Highlands Police Command, Fire and Rescue, RFS and the SES volunteers have been active since last night and have continued to work, and they're currently still working in the Berrima area. Our IT staff worked last night through to early morning to restore power to all of our key sites to ensure the smooth operations today, and particularly at the sale yards. Our IT people were up at 4:30 and down there making sure that the sales could go through today. We've had staff today checking in on vulnerable people who are using life support machines at home in terms of their power needs, and also special mention to the water and sewer teams who were out last night, and we've had some challenges with our water and our sewer. But particular mention to John and Lyle, who were out at Robertson last night up until about midnight, undertaking some works to get the commissioning of the new water main connections to Robinson with the trunk main, so working in that storm event. And our operations team undertaking tree clearing works today. So it's been a major effort, and we've had quite a lot of severe weather events over the last couple of months, I'd say. And finally, I'll just do this officially, Mr. Park. I'm pleased to advise that after a highly competitive recruitment process, Michael Park has been appointed to the Executive Manager's Strategic Outcomes. Michael's been with Wingecarribee Shire Council since 2018, most recently in the role of Manager Strategic Land Use Planning, but prior to Wingecarribee worked in the private sector, as well as at Shoalhaven Council. So Michael, in the role of Executive Manager Strategic Outcomes, will sit within the executive and will play a key role in taking a strategic view to planning into the future and also the management of complex projects. So, thank you.
Well, thank you. It's amazing what does go on behind the scenes to keep the community ticking, if I could put it that way. And I think your recognition shows a new approach in the leadership style at this council. That closes the meeting. Thank you very much for attending.